move to the other big news story of the day, which is the controversy over the new farm bills, which has continued to play out in Parliament, in Rajya Sabha. Now, the bills were pushed through in the Rajya Sabha over the weekend through a voice vote. Opposition members in the upper house were not happy about that and protested very aggressively. 8 of them were suspended today for a week for their behavior in the house, went on protest. The Prime Minister has come out again to tell farmers that the bill is in their favor. These laws will help them and not harm them in any way. Just take a quick look at all of the action and drama today.
ये लोग एमएसपी पर किसानों को गुमराह करने में जुटे हैं। ये वही लोग हैं जो बरसों तक एमएसपी पर स्वामीनाथन कमेटी की सिफारिशों को अपने पैरों के नीचे दबाकर बैठे हैं।
All right, let's keep the politics aside for now, and a lot more has happened there through the day. Now you've had opposition members go up to the president, write to the president and say, please don't pass these bills. The BJP ally Shiromani Akali Dal may be rethinking its partnership with the BJP because of these bills. But what is in these bills? What is it that the government is promising and that some farmers are feeling unsure about? I think it's important to understand what is actually going on, and then of course you can come to your own decision whether passing of these bills is right or wrong. To help us do that, I have with me today T. Nanda Kumar, former Secretary Food and Agriculture, Dr. Sachchidanand Shukla, Chief Economist, Mahindra and Mahindra, and Siraj Chaudhry, MD and CEO of the National Collateral Management Services. Welcome to all of you and thank you for speaking with us today on this issue. Mr. Nanda Kumar, let me begin by getting your take. Now, a closer look at the provisions of the bill show that, on paper, it sounds great. Why should farmers, after all, be forced to sell their produce only in mandis, which are government mandis, only to, the government as the largest buyer and through middlemen? Why can't they go and sell to anybody or everybody? But if that's the case, why has that not been possible till now?
Well, let's accept this fact that minimum support price has actually become the maximum sale price in real terms. Now, if you look at Punjab and Haryana, where most of the opposition seems to be coming from, the paddy harvest gets sold out in a period of about 45 to 60 days in all the mandis. That's about, we are talking about 13 to 12 to 13 million tons equivalent of rice or wheat. Now, that's a huge operation. And there is this clear interest of the government in getting the APMC cess, which is nearly about 2,000 to 3,000 crores, which they use for developmental purposes or whatever other development that they want to do. So there is this fear which is coming out of the mandis, out of the Aratiyas who seem to get a commission. And they have this fear that outside, in the 60 or 45 days, one, the whole thing may not be sold at all. And secondly, there may not be big buyers who could buy that kind of a quantity. Now, the other part, which is unfortunately a recent ban on onion exports, is, I think, clearly has broken the trust, because what the Essential Commodities Act amendment said was very clearly processors of food, value-added participants and exporters will not be subjected to any export limits. Fair enough. Now, the government uses the Foreign Trade Development and Regulation Act of 1992, which incidentally was one of the changes post-91 in the export regime of the country, which replaced the old 1947 Import-Export Act, and used that to ban exports, whereas actually that act was intended to promote exports. So I suppose we have a problem here in terms of the optics in Punjab, Haryana in particular. But you don't see that same reaction probably in Maharashtra, which is more like a fruit and horticulture state, or Karnataka, which is again more like a fruit and horticulture state, where there is no MSP. So I think there is a set of people who somehow are afraid that the minimum support price regime will go away, which seems to be the real fear. And that seems to be arising out of the fact that in these acts, the word MSP is not mentioned, even though it's not mentioned that MSP will not be there or it will be abolished or anything of that sort. But I think the indexing part of the price doesn't mention MSP. So I suppose it's more like, a little bit of bad drafting, a little bit of trust deficit, which seems to have added to the problem. Yep.
Okay, so a couple of things which are important to understand, and let me go across to Siraj Chaudhry for the next leg of this discussion. Largely farmers from Punjab, Haryana and parts of Uttar Pradesh are protesting. These happen to be larger farmers who are also the biggest beneficiaries of the whole MSP system. Would it be correct to say then a certain section of farmers stand to lose out if a new stronger system evolves which would eventually replace MSP? Mr. Chaudhry, I believe your audio is on mute. I request you to unmute and answer that question.
So firstly, I wouldn't take a sort of call that it's only the large farmers which are protesting, because what we see on the street, it's hard to differentiate about who's large and who's small as a farmer. But more importantly, I think, yes, what Mr. Nanda Kumar has just said, that it is the fear. It is really the concern. I mean, these are the states where the government procurement and also the collection from the cess is the highest. And if you look at the total agriculture cess collection, the largest part of it comes from the government procurement schemes. So there is obviously this concern with these farmers that, and these are actually the only two states, or government procurement is actually today what most farmers look for, given the agriculture price cycle, commodity price cycles, where the price realization for most crops are relatively lower. So this is one support system which is still standing, and there is yes, while it may be in only a limited number of states, there are those farmers who are heavily dependent on it, and therefore this fear that it may ultimately be a roadmap to get away from that is what is causing the anxiety. So what is needed is really a more trust building, and yes, examples of things like onion export ban don't really help that cause. And it doesn't help from both ways, because while we're talking about the farmers not at the moment trusting the government action, but it also actually creates distrust with the industry, the trade, the people that we're trying to attract to the farmers. This act or these changes are supposed to bring the industry, the processors, the exporters closer to the farmers, but that can only happen when there is trust and consistency in the processes of the regulatory regime. And so that trust building, both for the farmers as well as the industry, is needed for the outcomes to be as successful and beneficial as they are envisaged to be.
The question is that, is the current situation conducive for private players to come in? And we'll come to that in just a bit. But Mr. Shukla, I want to understand why this trust deficit abounds. The government has come on record to say several times that MSPs will not be touched, MSPs have been hiked. Is it because in the scheme of things, the natural progression, the next logical step of opening up the market for agricultural produce is to get rid of an old mechanism like the MSP, which in current terms many believe is outdated? It's leading to skewed crop cultivation, so too much rice and wheat in certain states. We have also in our stocks more cereal than we need, shortage of other produce, etc. So is that just the next logical step and that's why the fear?
It is, Tamanna, if you look at what's been happening really, look at agriculture. This is the most shackled sector in the economy, right? We've had those LPG reforms in 1991, where industry after industry or sector after sector got really the freedom or the rules of the market or commercial principles were allowed to function. And look at the evidence also since 1991, Tamanna. Every sector where you have removed restrictions today is flourishing, right? It is doing far better than it used to. Now, the problem with agriculture is there is no market creation, there is no level playing field for buyers and sellers, and therefore there is no effective or better price discovery. And people are used to these mechanisms like MSP. They are also used to monopolies like the APMCs. And you've never had really a market that functions, nor did you really have an effective or better price discovery. Now, whenever you try to change this sort of a regime, and especially after say 70 odd years, you will find resistance. Now, what it does essentially by doing that is it will bring in lot of investment attractiveness to agriculture by way of better market price discovery, etc., and more FDI or investments. And if you're trying to gradually dismantle monopoly, right? So just think about it, Tamanna. Let me give you a backdrop. We have lakhs of villages, but we have just about less than 2,500 APMCs and less than 4,900 sub-markets. And whatever the government procures, only a third of wheat and rice is really bought by the government. And even within that, so for example, let me talk only wheat, because the protest is coming from states like Punjab. Just 5 states account for bulk of the wheat buying. Just 7 states account for rice. And as we speak, Tamanna, there are 22 states that have already allowed some sort of direct procurement by private parties. And we also have an example wherein states like Bihar, Sikkim, etc. don't really have APMCs.
Mr. Shukla, let me come back to you on that. Yeah. Exactly. No, but Mr. Shukla, if you give me a minute, let me come back to you on that. Like states like Bihar that you're mentioning, dismantled APMC Act in 2006. It's not really like the plight of farmers has changed over there. Can this really work when a majority of our farmers have very small land holdings? Can the middlemen who right now rule the roost in these areas, will they disappear from the picture? How will these farmers go and sell their produce? Where? Is the infrastructure there? Is the cold storage there? Is the transportation there? Are corporates going to come in and hunt for a lot of these farmers and find some kind of a system that works?
Absolutely valid concern, Tamanna. Just giving choice to sellers or farmers is not going to be enough, right? If you have to market that whatever you produce, you need to have roads, you need to have supply chain, logistics, infrastructure, all of that, so that you can really sell some of these things. So unless you really supplement these reforms by developing a strong agri-logistics chain market connectivity on the ground, these will not really help. As far as small farmers are concerned, they will become economically viable only through diversification into higher value crops or value added crops. And you need massive investments into these value chains. Otherwise, I mean, just doing these reforms after 70 good years will not really mean much, because there is the second leg that is a natural progression. Unless the government, and not just the central government, but also because there's a state subject, even state governments have to pitch in. And without doing these sort of, logistics and the supply chain kind of things, and without attracting the necessary capital, it is not going to be enough. So yes, well begun is what I would say to this. But I think there is a long way to go before the farmer really benefits from these.
Well begun is half done. T. Nanda Kumar, how do you look at some of these issues that I have listed out? And these are real issues. Let's forget about, this specific situation for a second that, farmers from Punjab, Haryana have these issues. They're worried about MSP. MSP will clearly continue because no government will want to come and upset the apple cart to that extent. You have food security concerns, etc. So let's just keep that aside. Is there enough of a system in place to actually make this work? Will the ahartiyas, or the middlemen you were talking about, just disappear from the system or just move to the newer system as the facilitators?
Well, I think most of the corporates would also employ someone or the other to procure goods for them. I don't think they're going to open purchase centers everywhere and do the kind of stuff that they would probably do. So if they're in big volume, I think they will use intermediaries, and these intermediaries will probably work to a different discipline and probably to a different levels of technology and efficiency. I think that's given. But right now, I think the fear seems to be that let's look at Bihar. Now, Bihar abolished their APMCs. A little bit of change happened, but not enough to say with some confidence that all the farmers in Bihar are better off than where states are having APMCs. The problems are many. Logistics is one, storage is another, organization of farmers, the lack of it is probably a third kind of an option. And I think the challenge really is in perishables. Let's look at the way the consumer market will move. The consumer market will be moving towards non-cereals in terms of either pulses or vegetables, fruits, milk, egg, etc. Now, if that is going to be the shift in consumer preference, and that's the shift in the nature of the Indian thali, farmers will respond by producing. But I think we still don't have a system, whether private or public, to ensure that this is collected, a fair price. I mean, fair can be interpreted in many ways, but a fair price where the farmer doesn't leave that particular crop and it reaches the consumer. The only example we have is milk, which is probably the most perishable, harvested twice a day, but it has an excellent system in operation which takes care of the milk supply. Eggs and poultry could be the other one, which can be, which is more driven by a private initiative. But I think we have to put together systems where we handle perishables and we give this comfort to the farmer that his produce will be purchased in toto. And that's what the milk example is. No milk is returned to the farmer. It's taken, converted into powder or whatever. So whatever the farmer offers will be purchased by whosoever is buying it. And there is a trust based on whatever agreement we have with the farmer. I think that's the most important part. The infrastructure will follow after this trust is built up.
No, so who is going to be on the other side of it? And let me go across to Siraj Chaudhry. Can this trust be built up? Can this very ambitious plan actually be executed without the states in the picture? Right now, the whole narrative has been pitched as a center versus state situation, another attack on federalism, states losing out their mandi fees, intrastate agriculture is a state subject, but this rule will override it. Can this really roll out without them in the picture to ensure it happens?
See, the trust building takes time. You cannot build trust overnight, and it requires consistent actions, consistent delivery of what has been said and promised, and repeated actions sort of following the path that has been set. Yes, indeed, agriculture is a state subject, and it will be difficult. I would say it would be easier for this policy to roll out and benefit the people it is supposed to benefit if the states are willing participants in this rather than reluctant either resistors or reluctant participants. So because it is not just about opening up the sort of the system of trading or system of selling for the farmers, you require infrastructure, you require a conducive environment to attract investment in this space. This is not going to happen overnight. These reforms are great. They were much needed. They've been asked for a very long time. But by just writing a new law, we are not just suddenly going to change the face of Indian agriculture. The farmers remain the same, the middlemen remain the same, and they are there not because they are there as exploiters only. They're people actually who serve value. I mean, who are providing value. I mean, large part of Indian agriculture is still about landless farmers who do not have access to organized funding, and these middlemen are the people who are actually helping these farmers finance their agriculture and therefore have a link to carry them back to the market yard or wherever the goods can be traded. So we cannot wish them away overnight till we have brought in a lot of changes, which may mean the digitization of land records, getting private sector investment, creating incentive for private sector investment. Agriculture and food processing are not very lucrative industries. They are very low margin industries. So people or industry to invest will require significant tax incentives. A lot of the tax incentives and various initiatives come from the governments and the state. And if those are not coming along, then it will probably delay, if not completely slow down the whole transition that is being expected. So the cooperation of states is going to be very essential to make it a success. Because if the states are not coming along, then this whole process may just fall through. I mean, while we may have a very supportive law, we may have all the reforms, but it may not end up benefiting anyone.
Well, the politics is far from played out yet. It will be seen over the next few days. But meanwhile, this is one of those things that can go either way. On paper, it's an excellent move, ticks all the boxes, can go a long way in unshackling the Indian farmer. But is that entire system ready over there? Can you change things overnight without breaking them first? And which is why this is such an important story to understand and track. Thank you so much to all of you for joining us on this very crucial discussion. We'll take a very short break and then we come back with the question on everyone's mind. Why is the IPO rush back? Which are the ones that work? Will all IPOs have the kind of excellent debut Happiest Minds and Root have had today? Which are the ones which look like likely winners? That entire discussion coming up after this break. Don't go away.